Hi everyone, welcome. Last session, or the last three sessions before we go for a pint, so that's good timing. My name's Pete Russell, and I founded Ubi, which is that lots of O's, stands for out of our own backyards. And we are a gate-to-plate platform for real food. I'll explain a little bit more. But we started this actually about 14 years ago, 2008, as an idea on a little island called Waiheke Island in New Zealand, with the idea of basically how can we come up with a better way, a better supply chain, short supply chain for food, direct from farms to consumers. So it's an idea you all have heard plenty about, but we've been playing with this for a long time. And in the last 2 years, we started running the model here in the UK, and this is where we are growing and scaling it out. So, as I mentioned, UBI stands for out of our own backyards, which represents local food and food that we can produce ourselves for ourselves within our own communities. The term real, everyone's got their own interpretation of real. For us, what that means is regenerative, food that is ethical, that's authentic, as in it's the real deal, and it's as local as possible. So that's what we mean by real. As a platform, that's what we're here to support. We're not a platform for any food. We're a platform for food that we feel is needed and makes a difference that I think most of the people here would agree with is important. So I'll just give you a quick background about who we are, what we do, and then I want to get into the topic of the conversation today, which is all about decentralized food systems and distributed ownership, and why we think that these are two very critical aspects to future of food systems. So our platform is an online marketplace, a decentralized marketplace using low-cost logistics through independent, locally owned regional hubs. And it's important that the logistics is something that is low cost, because that's what allows for the farmers to get a greater proportion of the retail value, and it also allows for the price to be competitive enough to be able to compete with the main marketplace. And so the way we get our logistical costs down is by using existing infrastructure that's already there, and by using existing workforce that's already there, and that is through independent, often farm-based food hubs, which are packing the food on site, on farm, and delivering from farm direct to houses. So the cost of distribution, the cost of the supply chain is reduced drastically, which means it's better economics for everyone involved. Just to give you a bit of a sense, as I mentioned, we started here May of 2020, so just over 2 years ago. We started with a blank slate. First hub was in Bristol. And then since then, we've been opening up with a new hub has been getting set up on the system about one a month. However, right now it's accelerated a bit more in the last few months, and so we're up to 31 hubs that are running on the platform throughout the UK, and it's growing quite quickly. And the product that we deliver is software. It's software that facilitates all the activities that are needed to get food from the gate to the plate. And it gives everyone the tools that they need and the information they need to do what they need to do to move that food all the way to the end consumer. Okay? We've had some pretty fast traction, as I mentioned. There's quite a fast take-up, and to date, well, yeah, it's more than that now. It's coming up to 4 million in GMV, which is the total value of produce that's been sold through the platform, and as I mentioned, 31 hubs are on the platform now. So that's just to give a bit of context. Zooming out and looking more at the macro context that we're in is, if you think about where our food system is in 80-year cycles, prior to World War II, the main shopping paradigm was over the counter. You would go into your local village shop and you'd say, here's my shopping list, and you'd wait at the counter. They'd go out the back, they'd put it all together for you, bring it to the counter, you pay them and take it home. And then World War II was a real catalyst, a transition catalyst, Because what it enabled us to do was effectively apply industrial thinking, industrial systems to food distribution, and the supermarkets came about. And it was, there's no doubt that the last 80 years has been dominated by the supermarket shopping model. But what that has also done at the same time is it's centralised our food systems. So prior to that, it was a largely decentralised food system. Supermarkets really centralised our food systems. But we're now in that transition phase, and I think it's obvious to pretty much everyone that the new paradigm for shopping overall is online. And it's a completely different supply chain scenario. And food is a laggard in the online space. Books, CDs were the first to come in, but food has always been the hardest nut to crack. But it's the biggest nut, right? And really, the catalyst for this shift in the food space, obviously to everyone here, is the lockdowns, the pandemic, right? Everyone had to shop online, and everyone who was a skeptic went, oh, wow, that's actually pretty cool. That's really something I don't want to stop doing now. And so we're entering into a whole new paradigm where this online shopping is becoming the main way that people are consuming food and will continue to grow, which means that this space is forming in a way that's going to affect society for probably the next 80-odd years. And which brings me on to the topic of decentralization and distributed ownership. So what we have right now is a dominant system which is centralized. And so this chart here, some of you have probably seen it, it's been around since the 60s, sort of demonstrates a centralized model on the left, where everything is controlled at the center and distributed outward in a radius sort of fashion. To a large degree, region to region, that's the sort of model that the supermarket model and the large industrial model is facilitating. The challenge with that is all the control is at the centre, and people on the periphery are really getting a fairly raw deal. A lot of the value is being sucked up and extracted. Don't need to tell that story too much. What we have leading into the online economy of food is the potential for that to take hold again and to become the main way that we do it. So you've got your large centralised organisations like your Ocados and your Tesco's and so forth saying, well, we're just going to take out this model and just move it into the next. But I think there's a real opportunity here for us to actually level the playing field a bit and to reintroduce the possibility of a decentralised model, and that we've actually got, because of the ubiquitous nature of technology and phones and things like that, we've actually got an opportunity of levelling the playing field where small-scale operators within the food space have the ability to have the same kind of presence as some of the bigger players. We don't have the massive shopping mall, car parks and things like that as a competitive advantage, but in technical world, in digital world, you don't need that. You just need the real estate of the screen. So this is our chance. So the decentralized model is basically about saying, how can we create the systems that you would expect in a Ocado or something like that? How can we create those systems and make them available to all of the small, independent food producers and food vendors so that they can have a competitive edge in the market and they can provide the level of convenience and price that will actually outcompete or at least compete with the centralized players. So we're at that point now where it's possible to do this. It's possible to create a digital product that can actually compete in terms of its capacity to sell, to transact, and to operate the logistics. And that's what we're working on. We're working on that digital platform. And that digital platform is one which facilitates a decentralized model where every location has got an independently, locally owned facility that's running a locally owned food distribution operation, and that's not controlled centrally by anyone. They're autonomous operations, but they share a common platform that they can work on. So that then raises the next question, is like, yeah, that's nice, but ultimately who controls the platform controls all these decentralized independent players. And that's where the next topic of ownership comes in. And I don't know who here went to the George Monbiot talk. Yeah, towards the end, he was talking about this idea of, this centralized ownership is a problem. We need to have weak IP laws, strong antitrust laws. You can have laws, you can say you want to have these laws, but are they actually going to come into play? So you can't really rely on policy to create that. We need to have distributed ownership that's implied within the system. And so the idea that we're working on now, and we're consulting and working on the plans and consulting with, is how do we create a platform like this to have distributed ownership or user ownership? And we can borrow concepts from the likes of cooperatives and associations and federations and so on, and then we can even look forward to some of the groundbreaking ideas of DAOs or DAOs, using blockchain technology. But ultimately what we're trying to work on here is an ownership model where the users of the platform are the owners of the platform. And so that's the challenge. How do we do this in a way that we're not just repeating an old ownership model that's been done before and has demonstrated there's ways of, corrupting or running these things off the rails? How do we create a new kind of decentralized ownership model or distributed ownership model that's going to allow us to build a really strong platform to enable independent food producers and growers and vendors to be able to compete with the centralized players, where you're able to have a voice and a position of influence in the direction the business goes, but you also have the platform goes, but you also have ownership in returns that are generated by the platform. But where it doesn't devolve to lowest common denominator thinking and stagnation. So this is the challenge that we sort of are coming around to trying to address with a fresh set of sort of beginner's eyes of a user ownership model. And we'll be consulting with as many people as we can to find out and to hear as many ideas and concepts in order to develop this user-owned model so that you can have a common platform that a lot of people can benefit from, contribute to continue the development of the platform to stay relevant to the time and to stay competitive with the large players who've got the deep pockets and the capacity to invest in these things. But at the same time, maintaining that level of ownership where it's not going to be about someone building a platform and then flipping it on to Amazon or some of these other larger players. So I did have another slide that I wanted to just put up, but we couldn't quite slip it in there. And it's effectively this idea of, why not just open source the software? And that's a really good question and something that we've been posed a few times. But I think that one of the challenges and the reasons why today we haven't actually open sourced our software is because it's really hard to actually manage open source software. It takes a lot of energy, a lot of time to do a proper job of managing open source software. And it's distracting. But I'm not really sure, and I'd be open to having discussion and debate about this, I'm not really sure that open source is actually really the best way to go. I think it's more around open ownership and the ability to be able to concentrate effort into a platform where all the features and so forth can be built in and shared by everyone, where you can actually generate more about access for everyone through an ownership model rather than through a source code, a sort of open ownership model rather than through a source code model. And finally, the other consideration here is around food system development for the future, is around the concept of collaboration versus competition. One of the things that we're involved with is a project called the Food Data Collaboration Project, where we're working with other technology platforms for this type of, for independent food. And it's about how can we interoperate with other independent platforms so that it's not about one platform is sort of taking the whole market. It's more about how can platforms work together in order to be able to feed each other with data and with food, supplies and so forth, in order to make in order to satisfy the massive amount of demand that's in the market for food in a way that is still in line with the whole idea of decentralized or distributed ownership. So that's the guts of what we are thinking about and talking about, and hope you have some time to mull over that and think about, what's important to you and what matters. We'd be really interested to hear your thoughts about this, because it is something that we're venturing into. We want to understand ourselves, but we know, for me, deep in my gut, I really feel that this is a time where distributed ownership and decentralized systems are ready to really take a role in the food system. So thank you very much. I've got a few minutes for questions if anyone has any. Yep, thank you.
But
Wow, I wasn't expecting that.
neither was I. What could be the nodes in that distributed network? The way you told the story there, it was kind of thinking about consumers and maybe farmers connecting directly, or some distributor in the middle. What, in principle, could be the nodes in that system beyond that?
Yeah, I think the primary node is the hub, the aggregation hub, in the middle between the farmer and the customer. But that aggregation point can be on farm, or it can be a standalone, or it can be a high street retailer, or it could be in a farm shop. So, but that function of aggregation is like the primary node. And then outside of that, the software, we're able to help to facilitate secondary nodes for aggregation, secondary levels of aggregation, transport, like if not so much in the form of nodes, but in the form of connections. There's a whole opportunity there around management of transport and ensuring treating the half-empty truck problem and so on. I hope that answers it to a degree. Yeah. Yep. Thanks.
Hi. First, I just want to say thank you so much.
Cheers,
I really love the idea of big data and high tech and the whole notion of the Internet of Things getting into this field in general, because agriculture in the past was really seen as sort of, not hip, not modern, sort of old, and the whole idea of bringing high tech thinking in a sort of cool way.
Yeah.
I think it's great. I have an engineering and computer background, and so this is exactly the kind of thing that's I think is hopeful for like a new generation that's hip and into the internet. And so many farmers are like 65 and up. So if we're going to get younger people, this has to be how, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So thank you for that. But just my question is, can you give an example of how it would really work? Like, is there already an app that I can use?
Yeah, there is.
So say more about that if you would, please.
Yeah, sure. So right now we started by building an actual, fully operational business in New Zealand. One in Auckland, one in Christchurch, one in Sydney. And that's where you've got a warehouse and packers and so forth. And then we built the software around running those businesses ourselves. So for it, we built the software for ourselves. So now the product is it's web-based. It's not an app. It's a web-based platform, like a SaaS product, right? That the likes of, there's 31 of them around the country now. It could be Tolhurst Organic or Nep Farm that are using our system to facilitate all the sales, the transactions, and the logistics to get the customers to sign up, to buy their product, put it in a cart, or subscribe to a box. And then our software automates a lot of the recurring activities that would go on in that business model. And so it's really just something that a business will move their operation onto. We train them up, and then it's just a percentage of sales is what our revenue model is. Yep. And I think this is the last one. Yep. Cheers.
Hi, it's Owen here.
Thanks, Owen.
So I was wondering what you think the role of cryptocurrencies and blockchain type technologies will be in sort of bringing about a regenerative finance, or refi as it's sort of nicknamed, in the future, and sort of are you waiting on the sort of regulations on that kind of thing to be clarified before you go into that? Because at the moment the regulations aren't really quite there, but there are some really promising projects like Regen Network. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. So do you think, because obviously that is sort of this kind of pattern applied to value systems itself, which can really help change the future of value and of finance. So, do you think that's actually in the spotlight anytime soon? Is that in the limelight?
It will be, I think. Now is a really strange time, right, with crypto. There's a lot of doubt, a lot of fear going on in the space, and so we've got to recognise that our user base are probably not crypto, savvy, and so we've got to be very conscious of the relevance in that. But one of our investors recently that has invested in this is Dave Atkinson, who's the commercial director for Holochain. I don't know if you're familiar with Holo at all. So Holochain is a new generation of blockchain. And so that is something that we're very, I personally see is definitely in the 5-year time race, but we'll have to talk about that another time. Thank you very much. Cheers, guys.